Republican National Committee Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel. Fight for Schools, Ian Pryor. And your moderator, O'Connor and Company, Larry O'Connor.
Good morning. It's Saturday morning. How are you? We are bringing you good tidings from the now red state of Virginia. And I'm hoping in the next 20 minutes we can talk about a little bit of how it happened with Ian Pryor, why it happened with Charlie Hurt, and how it can happen in your state with Chairwoman McDaniel. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So first of all, clear this up here, Charlie, because I've had you on my radio show for years now. And I remember saying, it's like, can we stop calling Virginia purple? It's blue, for God's sake. Every seat is filled with a Democrat. And I remember you said, yeah, pretty much, yeah. It's gone. So why did this happen?
Well, I mean, I can't tell you how long, because I grew up in Virginia. My people have been from Southern Virginia, actual Virginia, forever.
Like he has to qualify that. Southern Virginia, not the D.C. part, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's funny. When I'm in D.C. and I tell people that I'm from a small tobacco town, they're like, is it still legal to grow tobacco? It's like, yeah, we're still growing tobacco and it's still legal. It's not just weed you can smell.
Right. They don't have to ask about that now, yeah.
But it was amazing. It took me, literally, it was like 10 years of agonizing before I admitted that Virginia was no longer a red state. It was no longer a purple state. It's a full-blown blue state. And all of it has to do with the federal bureaucracy in Northern Virginia that corrupts the entire state.
Right.
And we're now like Illinois, that, you know, a lot of Illinois is actually a pretty good state. The problem is they're held captive by this totalitarian dictatorship called Chicago.
And yet this year, just 3 months ago, the governor, Glenn Youngkin, yeah boy, the lieutenant governor, the incredible, remember her name, Winsome Sears, the attorney general, Jason Miyares, the majority in the House of Delegates, now Republicans, and in the Senate, the Democrats have a one-seat majority, but already on key issues, Democrats are crossing the aisle because they're reading the room. So, Ian Pryor, you're in Loudoun County. You and a lot of Loudoun County, Virginia. A lot of moms and dads got kind of fed up with their kids having to do school from a laptop on the kitchen table. And also they were kind of fed up because by seeing what their kids were learning, they were, well, not real happy with the quality of the curriculum. What ended up happening at those school board meetings became a movement that you were able to sort of organize in your own way with Fight for Schools.
Yeah, that's right. It really did start with the open schools movement. You had people that were seeing, you know, they're at home, working from home, they've got their children learning from home, and they're seeing what they're learning at schools. And then you have all this swirl, and then about a year ago, you had, 700 people in a private Facebook group, includes teachers, administrators, school board members, our Soros-backed Commonwealth attorney, that created an enemies list of about 60 or 70 parents. And, that lit the match.
Yeah.
And, we just kept going. Our focus was bringing attention to what was happening in the schools. We also launched a removal petition for 6 of the school board members that were in there. And, the ironic part was that they kept saying, on the left, oh, you're just using this fight to win elections. No. We were using the election to win our fight.
There you go. That is a great point. And I guess I'd love to sort of have both of you answer this question, because I feel like we Republicans, we fall into the trap that the mainstream media wants to be in, which is all we care about every 4 years is who wins the presidency. And don't get me wrong, I know there's a lot of talk, especially today, about the presidency, and that is important. But we lose sight, if all we focus on is what's happening in the White House, we lose sight of what's happening in our house and in our neighborhood. And I know when you became chairwoman of the RNC, you didn't think, all right, we're going to get a hold of those school boards. But that is actually where a political movement starts, isn't it?
Well, I think the whole ticket is important. And as much as the president's important, turning out for those school board races is so critical because it's helping the whole ticket. The RNC does the turnout in Virginia. Glenn Youngkin came to us early on and said, we want you to do the ground game. We want you to do the election day operations. So the RNC took that role. We had 13 offices. We found 125,000 unexpected voters. They were Trump voters that normally don't vote in midterm elections. We identified them. We got President Trump on the phone with them. We turned them out. We took the energy from the parents. But Glenn Youngkin was a great candidate, and then we had a great infrastructure, and that's what made the difference.
Yeah. And Ian, when you say you use the election to win your fight, I mean, it's great that, you're a Republican.
Yes.
And it's great that a Republican candidate won for you, but pull on that thread a little bit more. You had a bunch of parents there joining your cause who really probably didn't have any political identification, or maybe even were Democrats.
Right. Yeah, we had Democrats, we had libertarians. It's what you have to do is you have to change the power dynamic. And it's not necessarily Republican versus Democrat power dynamic. It's the elected officials versus the people they represent power dynamic. And the shift has gone way too far so that those elected officials have the power. We need to change that. And we're still fighting. Like I said, we've got our Commonwealth Attorney's Office over there. But a couple of things that I would say to people is, one, don't be afraid that they're going to call you names. Whatever they call you, once you punch through that, they've got nothing else. Two, do not be afraid to lose. You have to go in there with every tactic. You have to think 6 steps ahead of them so that when you win, you win. When you lose, you win. I call it activism arbitrage.
All right, I'm going to follow up on that for a minute. I like that, activism arbitrage. But here's the thing. There's calling you names, and then there's actually launching an FBI counterintelligence, counterterrorism investigation on you because as an angry mother or father, you raise your voice to a school board member. They called you domestic terrorists. And by the way, that was, a month and a half before the election. It's obvious what was going on there, but that must have made you a little bit trepidatious next time a school board meeting came around.
It did for about a minute, and then I said, you know what, let's just flip the script and own it, right? Let's go in there, and we know what we're about. We know we're about using our legal rights, our constitutional rights, and we're going to go there and do whatever it takes, like I said, to figure out ways to take away the power from them and return it back to the people. So that could be through litigation. It could be through communicating your message to the media, going to school board meetings, gathering intelligence from people inside the system itself who are, quite frankly, fed up.
Well, and listen, I can tell this is going to be self-serving, but it's really about our radio station, WMAL in Washington. They covered this story quite a bit, and it got national exposure. Replicating it in your community, with this stuff going on in your school board meetings, you go to your local talk radio hosts, you talk to them and you bring them this story and tell them what's happening. If they don't care and all they want to talk about is Biden and Pelosi, they suck. All right? This is the best radio content you're ever going to find, and I think we proved that here. We did. But I got to call a quick timeout because I read the mainstream media. I watch CNN all the time, Charlie, and I think we're missing the story here. I mean, I watched the analysis of the Commonwealth counterpunch there after the election, and they told me this really was because of 2 things. Because of all you racists, right? Critical race theory and all the dog whistles that Youngkin was blowing. And Terry McAuliffe was a terrible candidate. That's what they told me. Terry McAuliffe, he's a flawed candidate.
Well, the 2 things about, first of all, Terry McAuliffe was a terrible candidate. He's a horrible person.
To be fair, he did kind of stink.
But this is what should keep all of us up at night. He won 49% of the vote. I mean, that is terrifying. And it's, no less or more terrifying than the fact that Joe Biden got 3 votes in America. It's a serious problem.
It's probably more accurate than the final count they gave us. But.
And it simply underscores we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
But I think the real thing here is, we live in sort of an age of political realignments, which is very exciting for those of us who actually believe in this stuff and actually believe and fight for what we actually believe in. It's obviously nobody was a better voice of that than President Trump himself, because he realigned so much of the politics by simply walking in and observing things that in this sort of reign of absurdity, the 2 political camps had sort of ignored for so long. But what Glenn Youngkin did was he walked in and took the issue, the single most Democratic issue, the strongest point for Democrats, and completely he walked up and stole it from him like stealing candy from a baby. It was amazing. And now he owns it. And Republicans own it. Conservatives own it.
Yep.
And it wasn't because Republicans were so excited about it. It's because people who vote Democrat said, I'm tired of this, and I'm going to go over to the other side.
It's such an important point, and I know you want to pick up on this, Chairman McDaniel, because up until, if you said the key issue in Virginia this last election was education, all the stupid pundits on TV would tell you, and I mean all of them, they say, oh, well, the Democrats win. Because the education issue up until this year was always promising more money to the teachers union. And that's not what education is.
So I actually gave a speech in the summer before the Youngkin race saying America has a sleeping giant that's been awoken, and it's moms, because I am one of those moms. And I have a son that just finally this week got to stop wearing a mask. Tell me how a child can learn when they can't see a teacher speaking, talking about concepts like Algebra 2 or calculus. Tell me how that's good for our kids. And then to have the Biden administration to have the audacity to call us domestic terrorists for saying, well, our kids should be able to think for themselves, make choices for themselves, not have the government force vaccines on them, not have the government force masks on them, and not have biological males compete with our young women in sports. These are the things that moms are standing for. So wake up, Democrats. We're involved in our kids' education. And on top of that, we were the ones setting up the Zoom classes, and we were the ones dealing with the mental health issues and watching our kids suffer under Democrat rule. I'm from the People's Republic of Michigan under Gretchen Whitmer. But that has energized a whole party. But I will say this. We have to keep the energy going. They will do it again. They want to do it again. They have not learned their lesson. So if we do not mobilize and take the energy from Virginia across the country, we will not defeat them this November. Everything is about winning back the House and the Senate and governorships and school boards across America.
There you go.
And we need everyone engaged right now.
That's right. What happens in your house is more important than what happens in the White House. And this is the thing. You start focusing on your homeowners association, where they get mad at you if you fly a flag, for God's sake. I mean, that's the same kind of tyranny we're talking about. You start changing what's going on in those bodies, your school boards, your city councils. That's how a movement becomes a majority. And that's what we're trying to do here, because I think in our hearts and our minds, we are the majority in this country. We're just not the political majority all the time. All right, so let's talk big picture and then small picture. This is the part I like to call putting the chairwoman on the spot.
I love it. Go for it.
There are people on South Capitol right now who are really nervous, all right, in your office down at the RNC. But it's not going to be bad, I promise.
They're not nervous. They're fine.
There are a lot of people right now in this room right now and watching. They're like, yeah, that's going to happen in my state too. So I'm going to pick up the phone, I'm going to call the RNC, and they're going to write a check, and everything will be great. Well, because that's what they think, all right? So obviously that's not what happens. But tell them what can happen. Tell them what they need to do first to then work in partnership with the RNC.
I think a big part of the Youngkin election was also election integrity. We talk about the issues that propelled him to victory, getting rid of the grocery tax, talking about parents, but we need people to get out and be election day workers, be poll watchers. We had 500 lawyers on the ground on election day in Virginia, triaging issues that were happening. Some polling locations were not allowing people to vote if they didn't have a mask on, which was against Virginia law. We quickly fixed that. We now have election integrity directors in 18 states. The RNC has set that up. We're going to replicate what we did in Virginia across the country, but it only works if people volunteer. So we need everyone engaged in this election. And remember, you have to vote. You have to vote. The only vote that doesn't count is the one you do not cast. And this is an election where we all need to engage in election integrity, but we need to turn out and vote and make sure our friends and family vote. Bring 5 people with you, because the Democrats, we know, they care about one thing only, and that is power. And we care about our country and freedom and our rights and the greatest nation that we are blessed to live in. And this election will determine the fate of this country. We're on the front lines of determining that future. We need you more than ever.
There you go. And I know a lot of you, or a lot of you have people in your lives who I like to call Eeyore conservatives, right? Where it's like, oh, none of it matters. They're just going to steal it anyway. Nobody, even if I vote, it doesn't matter because my please shut those people out of your life, because if we don't have some kind of positive energy and hope behind what we believe in and what this country's to us, of course I know that they cheat. That's not new. They've been cheating for years. Hugh Hewitt's great book after 2001 was, if it's not close, they can't cheat. So let's make sure it's not close, all right? And then they can't cheat. All right. So that's the big picture. How about the small picture? Because Ian, you do have, I mean, they said, oh, Ian Pryor, he's just using this thing to help Glenn Youngkin, and you've already explained it was the other way around. But you do have a political background. You saw what was going on in Loudoun County at these school board meetings and how they were reacting and behaving, and I mean, they were the terrorists there trying to target people in private groups. You took that energy and you did form a political committee. You actually did say, okay, this is a political movement. How can everyone do what you did?
Well, I think first you got to go talk to all of them over there. Those are the Loudoun County moms.
Hey, Loudoun.
Energy, right there.
Oh, those moms.
But I think the lesson is, you know, this is not something where it's gonna come from Washington, D.C., and they're gonna come in and excite people. This is gonna come from the ground up. You know, I heard all the time that, this is a dark money operation in Loudoun County. And I was like checking my glove compartment for the checks.
Yeah,
I couldn't find them.
only.
I couldn't find them. It was mostly small dollar donations, but.
By the way, all the people who say it's a dark money operation have just checked their George Soros bank account, I assure you, because.
Look, you see, and it's not just the school boards, right? It's the school boards. It could be your prosecutor. It could be the special interests that are working behind the scenes in your community. But the real thing here is these people have never been challenged.
Yeah.
They're bullies and they have glass jaws. And the minute you step up and challenge them, they will make mistake after mistake after mistake.
Yeah.
And what you need is to be able to capitalize on those mistakes. And like I said, think 6, 7, 8, 10 steps ahead and have the end goal in mind. And the end goal is changing that power structure. And if it can happen in Loudoun County, it can happen anywhere in the country.
It will happen everywhere in the country. And the important thing is all of the fights that were happening in the D.C. region, you know for a fact, you've seen your kids' school books, you've seen the curriculum, you've seen what the school board does. It is happening everywhere in the country. So, Charlie, I think Loudoun County and Northern Virginia benefited, first, that it was a midterm, or off-year election, and there was a governor's election, so that true focus.
Should also frighten us. That should also frighten us because
that's why, yeah. And because we drew attention to it on our station, and I'll be honest, a lot of Fox News producers and people listen to our station on their way into work, so it ended up on national media. But that doesn't always happen, and in other parts of the country, they don't have that benefit. How can activists in their communities get on the radar of national media or even local media and make this case so that more people hear it?
Well, I think the most important thing is to make it about a real issue that actually matters, which, of course, you guys did such a spectacular job of highlighting that. And you know, the greatest thing about that election and the fact that it would turned on the issue of education is because it is such a fundamental issue that matters across the country. When Thomas Jefferson, a Virginian, died, this is a guy who had been President of the United States, Secretary of State, Governor of Virginia, Vice President, all these things. He didn't put any of that on his tombstone. He put on his tombstone that he had authored the Declaration of Independence, and he put on his tombstone that he had founded the University of Virginia, because Thomas Jefferson understood that you cannot have a free republic without an informed and educated electorate. And that was a very radical thing. And that's why we have public schools. It's why we have schools, period. And our dear, wonderful, amazing departed friend, Charles Krauthammer, said it best when he said, conservatives gave up when they walked off of college campuses.
Yeah.
And it's bad enough to have an electorate that is uninformed, but it's even worse when you have all these teachers, all these schools teaching this toxic, dishonest vitriol and teaching our children to hate our country. And unless we take back that, we got nothing.
Yep.
So God bless you guys, and God bless you moms for making the fight about that.
Yay, moms.
And you start there, and then we can get to all of the next things.
Well,
you want to fight a war in Ukraine? You need to have good schools in America.
And we just recalled 3 San Francisco school board members, okay? If you can do it in San Francisco, we can do it everywhere.
I'm sorry, again, I gotta do a fact check for Pinocchios. I watch CNN. Those were crazy right-wing extremists in San Francisco.
Oh, yes, I forgot.
That overturned them. Speaking of dearly departed friends, it's worth pointing out that our friend Andrew Breitbart, whose passing we acknowledged this week after 10 years, he had big Hollywood, big journalism, big government, big peace. The one website he wanted to open, and he never got to, you know this, Charlie, was gonna be big education. He wanted to focus on this stuff. He knew that this was a sleeping giant as well. So there you go. It's up to you now. Are you ready? Are you ready to change this country by changing your schools, changing your cities, changing your communities? We've been talking about the moms, and they're fantastic. I want to point out one dad in Loudoun to wrap this up, because I think the way you communicate a message, if you can boil it down to its essence, everybody gets it and everybody understands it. There was a dad a year ago. His name's Brandon Michon. He might be here. Let's go, Brandon.
Different Brandon.
Never met more than now. Brandon was sick and tired of his children not being able to go to his classroom and have to sit there at the kitchen table with a laptop doing class. And Brandon knew that he had been to Home Depot, he had been to the grocery store, he had been to the bank, he'd been to a bar. He'd been able to see, he didn't go to the strip clubs, but other people are going to strip clubs. And somehow all of those businesses had figured it out. After a year, they had figured out how to stay in business and do what they were supposed to do with the guidelines of the pandemic. And all Brandon did when he went to that school board meeting was to look at those school board members and say, figure it out. We've all figured it out. Figure it out. And that's where a movement was born. That's how you do it. Guys, thank you so much for your time. Go out and win. This is a big year. Let's do it.